is over.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Insiders. This is an interview, and we are privileged to have with us tonight the Queen of NE. So thank you so much for joining us today to chat a little bit of wrestling with us on this a little bit of a, kind of crazy day and a crazy year. But thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me and inviting me to come chat with you guys. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate your time. So I guess the first thing I'll ask you is, obviously you're a fan of AEW. And before we get to that, have you been a wrestling fan all your life? When did you kind of start getting into wrestling?
Kind of all my life, but I feel like everybody has a similar story, but my great-grandfather loved wrestling, and that's what he referred to it as. And I was lucky to have him in my life until I was 21. So he was, 94 when he passed. So it was kind of cool that I had this great-grandparent around, and he loved to show me wrestling. So I was like, probably like 9, maybe 8 or 9. And he showed me The Undertaker for the very first time and showed me because I was his favorite. And, that's what we watched together. And my mom would have flipped out if she knew because it was too scary, for me. Mm-hmm. And they, weren't as tight with their language as they are now, I suppose. But he liked to sneak it to me anyway. So that's kind of how I started watching it and seeing that character and that persona and the music and, the urn and all this stuff, right? It was intriguing for me. And I started to watch it on my own. And I've been pretty much a fan ever since. I took a little bit of a break when I went to college because we didn't have television. So couldn't watch it. Yeah. But I did watch the pay-per-views every single year with my cousin during those times when we both came back home from school. So it's been a long time.
There you go. That's awesome. That's cool. I being introduced to that character too to start you off. That's a heck of a way to start off.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Are you still a fan?
Set the bar pretty high.
Yeah, I know. That's what I came to realize, later as I was, understanding a lot more about the business. I was like, oh man, like he gave me the good stuff right away.
Oh man, that's great. Are you still a fan of his? Are you watching like the Last Ride stuff that WWE is showing now?
Oh man, yeah. What a great series that is. And it's illuminating because, you see all the time online and in some ways I watch him and I get nervous because I'm like, oh my God, you're injured and all this stuff. And hearing that perspective and the way he explains it and kind of shows you what's been going on with him in those matches, specifically like the Roman Reigns one where he specifically said, I shouldn't have been in the ring at all, right? And he talks a lot about it. And I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but it's definitely eye-opening, and I appreciate that he's sharing this very first time ever look into his life.
Yeah, I agree. Jeff and I were talking about this a little bit ago on a previous show, and we both mentioned that, Jeff's got an opinion, thinks that at the end of this, he's going to announce that the AJ Styles match was actually his last match. So yeah, I don't know if you think that's the case or what it's building up to, obviously without any spoilers, but do you think that, you think it's pretty much done, or you think he's got, listen, since I've watched it, one thing I've learned is he seems to be that type of person that is never going to be satisfied enough to want to retire because he always kind of thinks that there's something that didn't go exactly right in the match that he had.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And Jeff, I think that's a good thought. He says it in one of the episodes where he's watching the matches, and he said, one guy I regret not working with is AJ Styles, right? Because he said, that kid's got it, or however he phrased it at the time. And then, of course, we get it at this WrestleMania with the Boneyard. But, I feel like next year is, I'm pretty sure it's 30 years of The Undertaker.
Yep.
And I kind of think that maybe that will be the coffin closing on the Undertaker kind of thing. And I still think that he's going to be with WWE in some capacity, but I don't know if wrestling in the ring will be it anymore. But I feel like it's next year, but I don't know. We'll see. If it is, what a great way to go out. I mean, it's awesome.
That's what Jeff said, right, sir?
Yeah. I mean, what better way? Because, I mean, if you think about all of the elements of the Boneyard match, the way it was shot, the way that we really got different iterations of that character throughout that match, it kind of tells that story of a beginning, a middle, and an end when we see him riding off at the end. So I think it's a possibility because, he had those great, wonderful matches with Shawn Michaels, and he said in that clip that AJ reminds him of Shawn. So I think what better way than to go out with a match like that, especially how WWE has been playing this with AJ still being fearful and all of these things. Whenever we see him actually see the Undertaker or something about the Undertaker. So that's really what kind of fueled my thought on that.
Yeah, definitely, man. I still want an Undertaker Sting. I would love to see that as his last match, just because I think we were talking about this too, just because of the elements of it. I think that if they did it, obviously it'd be a cinematic match because Sting is up there in age too. But the stuff they can do with that, especially the Crows thing, I'm like, I mean, the horror guy in me would be like, yes, I'd be fanboying out. That would be awesome. Well, that's awesome. So you got the start there. So I guess I'll ask you, were you introduced to live matches? Did you go to any live matches back then?
Yeah, actually, what's cool about where I live is, it's Connecticut. So there is a location in Southern Connecticut.
WWE headquarters,
the headquarters. And what's cool about that is there were a lot of like former WWE guys that would come and do like local indie shows. And my boyfriend in high school loved wrestling, and we used to watch it together, and a big fan of the Hardys and stuff. And in our high school gym, no joke, we had a whole bunch of like retired WWE guys come in and put on performances there. And then we used to go to like indie shows around the greater New England area. And I've gone to several WWE shows when I was in high school and then as an adult. So they're fun. It's better to be live, I guess. You can't always be live, of course, because, money and travel. But it is fun when you get to be there in person and you get to see some of your favorites up close. Unfortunately, I've never gotten to see The Undertaker in person, but I have gotten to see Stone Cold and The Rock. So I guess that is perfect in its own way, because Stone Cold's my favorite from back in the day.
Yeah, that's awesome. You get to see The Rock. I did get the chance to see Undertaker actually at a house show in State College, of all things, and he wrestled Brock Lesnar. So what a match to see at a house show. So that was pretty awesome. So I got to see it wasn't as flashy of an entrance, obviously, with him as you would get for a pay-per-view. But still, being able to see him was pretty awesome. So if you've been to a few of them, do you have a favorite live show you've seen?
Well, it's going to be NXT TakeOver for me. I was really fortunate last year to be able to go to the TakeOver in New York before Mania and TakeOver 25, which was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And there is nothing like being at an NXT show. It is a different energy. It is a different vibe, and it's the most fun I've had. I've been to Money in the Bank last year as well, and several tapings of Raw and Smackdown and some of their house shows, like their Christmas season shows that they always have. I've been to a few of those, but the NXT takeovers for me are above and beyond everything I've ever been to for WWE.
What did you like so much about that? Was it the setting, like the fact? Were you in the? Was it in the university? Was it in the campus when you went to see the takeover? Was it a?
No, actually, it was a bank stadium, so like a regular stadium, but it's a lot smaller than what we have in Hartford. But it was more intimate of a setting, I guess. But I think what I really like about NXT in general is the vibe of the fans. The NXT crowd is very raucous and loud and really fun to like interact with. Sometimes you go to wrestling shows or like concerts and stuff and you're around people that are just kind of quiet. You're just like, aren't you excited to be here? Like, I'm excited to be here, you know? And that's not how it is in NXT. So that's the main reason I like it. Plus, the NXT is my favorite of WWE's shows. So I saw a lot of my favorite people. I got to see both of the iconic Adam Cole, Johnny Gargano matches in person. I mean, it was like so special. And I was so fortunate to be able to go. So of the WWE events I've been to, those are my favorite.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what, I mean, obviously so seems like you watched WWE. Now we'll talk to you a little bit about AEW. So obviously AEW first started back in September of last year. What got you into AEW, and did you know about it from the very start? Is it because some of the WWE guys went over? What got you into AEW exactly?
So it's actually New Japan Pro Wrestling. So I am a massive New Japan fan. I've been watching for a couple years now, and I really kind of fell in love with Bullet Club and Okada and, everything like that. So when Kenny Omega was in charge of Bullet Club, when he ousted AJ Styles and took over, that's around the time that I started to watch New Japan. And then him and the Bucks, formed the Elite. And then, Cody left WWE. He was doing stuff with Ring of Honor, which of course partners with New Japan. So we had some crossover and, seeing Cody work in Japan with the Young Bucks and Marty and Adam Cole before they killed him off on being the Elite, and he went off to NXT, and as well as Hangman Page. So it was kind of their journey that, I love these guys a lot. And Kenny Omega is my favorite wrestler. Well, one of my favorite wrestlers. I have a long list. But when they decided to form their own show, All In, I thought that was really cool. They were going to self-fund it and do all these things. And I was like, I'll check that out. Like, that's so cool. And it was a great show. And then, of course, that was the springboard for creating AEW. So I've kind of been there since the beginning, which sounds kind of stupid to say, like, oh, I've been there since day one, but kind of, because I started watching that whole thing unfold in New Japan, and the Bucks created Being the Elite on YouTube, and I watched every single episode of that. So that's what really got me into AEW. I was kind of sold on the idea, plus to have wrestling on TNT again, I thought would be really fun. And I liked some of the indie people they brought in as well, because I'm a huge indie wrestling fan. So that's kind of what drew me into AEW.
Okay. Yeah. Did you watch WCW when it was on TNT? Because obviously you mentioned having that back on TNT again. Did you watch WCW back in the day?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I like ECW a tiny bit more, but I did watch WCW back in the day. It was just fun. I liked the feel and the vibe and the people, so I had to tune in for that.
It's funny how whenever we talk to some people in the Northeast, you always get that answer about ECW.
Just a little bit.
Yeah,
more, yeah.
It's just, you just, oh man, living close to Philly, we got to see a good amount of ECW shows closer to me in smaller towns and stuff like that. And I always tell the story of, like, whenever I knew people that worked in some of these smaller arenas that they went to, and they would always say how when they left the arena, they would have, there'd be stop signs missing where there used to be stop signs, and there'd be like all this stuff, and people would just grab them and bring them into the show. But yeah, ECW was great. I can remember staying up late on a Saturday night and watching it when it came on, because it would always come on around, oh my goodness, I think 12:30, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, because they didn't want to ever show it during,
of course,
any kind of prime time. So yeah, I mean, obviously, WCW was a huge thing in the 90s, and
sure,
the whole Hulk Hogan thing. We talk about that all the time as being like one of the most iconic moments of a heel turn that you'd ever see.
Sure.
So yeah, well, that's awesome. So I guess I'll ask you, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff a little bit. How do you think that they're doing so far? I mean, if you had to rate their performance thus far, and I know it's very difficult now with the whole virus thing and everything and having no fans. It's hard on everyone. But if you had to rate their performance so far, how do you think that they're doing, as to where they are right now?
I think they're doing great, to be honest. And I'll tell you why. I think that they have exceeded a lot of people's expectations, including mine. And I just feel the presentation that they've been able to put on week in and week out for those 2 hours. And then on top of that, add AEW Dark and the stuff that they do on YouTube. Their social media game is excellent. The content that they provide is excellent. They've been able to knock it out of the park with the videos and the vignettes. That's something that WWE, I always felt, did a really great job with. And to see AEW just come out swinging with their creative has just been a joy to see. Now, that's not to say that I'm completely positive about AEW. There's a lot of problems, I feel like. Their women's division is definitely not what they advertised it to be at their very first press conference in Jacksonville. Way back in January of 2019, they said all these things, and they definitely did not deliver that. And I think they've pivoted definitely and turned the corner with that, but they still have a long way to go. So I am hopeful that they will continue the upward trajectory with their women's division, but I will say that that's been the biggest disappointment for me. And I'm not the biggest fan of like the Mike Tyson stuff. I'm not really into that. I don't understand. I mean, I get why people like it, but I don't understand why AEW has to do it. I'm not really feeling that. So like that kind of stuff makes me go, oh, really? Like I see that enough other places. I don't need to see that here kind of thing. But I think their use of like managers and factions is really, really great. Being a New Japan fan, we love factions and stuff like that. So I like it. I like their tag team focus because I love tag team wrestling. So, I mean, for me, there's more positives than negatives, but they definitely have some work to do.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I love the faction stuff myself. I joined the Dark Order as soon as I saw the website for that.
Oh no, not the Dark Order.
Didn't quite turn out the way I expected it to, but yes, I am a member of the Dark. I got propaganda. They sent me propaganda to post up and stuff like that. So I was like, but I'm going to come back to the Tyson thing with you a little bit later. But Jeff, go ahead, buddy. Ask some questions.
Yeah, well, speaking of managers and talent, I have to ask, what did you think of Tully Blanchard's promo with Shawn Spears yesterday?
I have to tell you that this is what I've been waiting for. I was waiting for this heat and this fire, and I felt like that's been missing from him specifically ever since that he joined up with Shawn Spears. And Spears in general is kind of wishy-washy for me because of how they've been putting him out there and what he's been doing. He's been, attacking Cody, and he's the chairman. And then, with Tully, now they're looking for a tag team partner. And then he's doing this news anchor thing. So it's kind of like weird. And I've been waiting for the moment when Tully was going to drop this straight fire and intensity. And we finally got it. And I was so excited.
Yeah, I mean oh my goodness. I think I probably watched it about 4 or 5 times in a row.
Yeah.
Because that was just fire. It was a master class on how to deliver a promo with passion and intensity. And I just, wow, I absolutely loved it. And, like you said earlier, the fact of how they use managers and all that, I think is just really brilliant. And it's definitely one of their high points of what they do. I guess my other question would be, what, kind of going back to the Dark Order, what are your thoughts on that? What did you think about Brody Lee coming in as the Exalted One, and how do you feel like that has gone since he's been there?
That's a great question, honestly, because I think at the beginning, you know, we people who watched the Super Smash Brothers in the indie scene knew who they were when they came out, but the vast majority of people had no idea what they were doing at Double or Nothing last year. Like, who are these people? Why is he sitting on a throne of humans? Why are they wearing masks? What's going on, right? So it kind of had a weird, shaky debut, and then they started to slowly build. And I thought the smartest thing they ever did was to create those vignettes and commercials, because you'd be watching AEW and you're watching a match, and then all of a sudden you'd think it went to commercial, and you're watching this commercial and they're, you know, it seems like a doctor's office or whatever it's going to be, or a commercial about a medicine. And then all of a sudden it's a commercial about Dark Order. I thought that was brilliant. And that was the thing that kind of got me more interested in the Dark Order. And I really liked how they built towards the Exalted One. Like, who is this guy? And, you know, he's very mysterious. And what is it going to mean when he finally arrives? You know, they built that up so strongly for 3 months, and then out comes Brody Lee. And I thought, well, good for you. You know, I'm excited for you. I'm a little nervous at the time, because I'm like, oh, you didn't really talk very much in WWE. I don't know how this is going to go. We'll see. But he's always been really intense, right? His Luke Harper character, super intense. And when he was in the Indies before that, he fought Moxley and on all that stuff. And he's very intense there too. So I'm like, okay, this could be cool for him, because this is like a very interesting character. And now I just kind of feel like they let it kind of fall flat. Like the promos that he's been in and what they've been kind of turning his character into, it doesn't feel like what the build for the Exalted One was supposed to be. I don't know. I expected more of a cult-like leadership based off of what they presented. And it kind of reminds me more of like a Mafia Don right now, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just different than what I thought it was going to be. So now I'm a little like disinterested, but I don't think he's by any means buried or ruined or anything like that after losing to Moxley. I think that now we're going to see kind of a scarier side of the Exalted One. But I guess my ultimate problem is I don't know who the Exalted One is. Like, what is your purpose? I think once they flesh that out, I might feel a little bit better, but it's kind of where I am for right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do have a follow-up to that. So obviously a lot of people with some of the videos and vignettes they did drew comparisons to Vince McMahon and how he was conducting himself and how he was treating some of the folks in the Dark Order. Did you see that comparison? Did you think the same thing?
Not one of them. It kind of felt like that, like a little bit. But it wasn't the first thing that popped into my head. Like I said before, it felt more like a mafia. Like, I love mafia movies and mafia, you know, stories and fiction, and both, you know, and regular nonfiction, because it's very real and was very real. But I find it very fascinating to learn about. So that's kind of what came to me first. But I can totally see how people would think it's a Vince McMahon thing. And, you know, Brody came out and said that it wasn't intentional, and, you know, he doesn't have any ill will towards Vince and all that stuff. But, you know, people are going to take it how they're going to take it. AEW has taken and continues to take small shots at WWE, and some are bigger than others. But let's say I wouldn't be shocked if that's really what it was.
Well, I mean, and speaking to that point, I mean, you know, AEW, every company has their pluses and minuses. And, you know, and we all, well, I won't say all of us get that. Most of us get that. But do you think that them taking those shots makes them look a certain way? Do you think it's necessary for them to take some of those shots?
I mean, you know, if you're in a competition, which you are, let's be honest, it is a competition, in terms of ratings and money, but they're not on the same playing field. That's just reality. WWE is a multi-billion-dollar company, right? It's huge. It's the biggest. AEW is not there. But in terms of Wednesday nights, they're in direct competition with NXT. If you're looking at it from a business, you know, standpoint,
right?
I mean, you know, everybody talks a little trash. Who hasn't played sports and talks trash to the other team? People do that all the time. I just think if it's excessive, that's when you shoot yourself in the foot. Like, I personally didn't care for the throne breaking by Cody. I hated that, actually. it bothered me. I'm like, see, this kind of stuff doesn't need to happen. Like, you want to take your little shots, go for it. Because sometimes you need to be called out for what you do. And that's on all sides, right? But I just feel that made me feel some type of way. I didn't like that. So I would say a healthy balance, right? Because you have to come to the game to play. And part of that is, you talk a little trash. But when it's excessive, that's when I personally have an issue.
Okay. I agree with that point. So I have another question in terms of just what they're doing in terms of building. Obviously, right now, if you look at their roster and you look at the top guys, that quite a few of those are former WWE people. Mm-hmm. How do you think AEW is doing with building talent that didn't come from WWE? And what would you like to see them do a little bit differently in terms of building some of those lesser known stars that we've been introduced to?
Such a vital, important question for AEW. I would say to that, Darby Allin as I think their first homegrown star, along with Sammy Guevara. They just are. Darby is universally, I feel like, more beloved than not. The pop for him when we had people in the audience was so loud, and he made a huge impact on the indie scene before he even came to AEW, and he's interesting and people are root for him. So him and Sammy Guevara, I think, are the biggest examples of young, new talent. Very young too, new talent to come in and kind of just take right off that weren't in WWE previously. I think they need to do more of that. Now, I will say that the TNT tournament is what I was hoping for that to be. And that to be the moment of, let's build these new people and let's build our new talent. Because sometimes they don't do the best job with that. And other times they do really well. And I was hoping for that in the TNT tournament. But of course, coronavirus, as we all know, we're very well aware of this 3 months in now. But I always wonder, like, were those the original people that were supposed to be in that tournament or what, right? Who else would have been included if they had their full roster? And to me, I wouldn't have put Cody and Archer in that tournament whatsoever. They didn't need a belt to fight over, just in my opinion. I think that they could have done that all by themselves, because those two could fight for the heavy regular championship, not just the TV, as I call it, TV title. And it would be the same match because it's the same importance, because that's who they are. I don't know. I was hoping for it and it didn't quite happen. But we'll see. I think that they started off, especially with the tag tournament, that was a great way to showcase new tag teams that, weren't in WWE and people didn't really know. And same with the ladies, they don't really have anybody that's we've seen elsewhere. So it's really kind of homegrown for them to build that division. And, they've been struggling with it, but it's getting better. I would also say Riho, when she came in, she was pretty well loved by most people. And she's definitely not or was not in WWE. So it's kind of the middle of the road for me. I think in some ways they succeed, and in others they need to do a lot of work, but I'm hoping the TNT championship defense that Cody is going to be doing every week is going to have that opportunity to showcase different talent.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, here's another. Do you think they need to add another belt, or do you think the fact that they have two kind of makes the two stand out a little bit more and they're more prestigious than having, 2 and 3 and 4 different belts?
I think they're good where they're at, because they have the AEW World Championship, they have now TNT, they have the tag titles, and they have the Women's Championship. That's good for now. Right. They're at a good, healthy size. Their roster is full. It's really full. And I think it's good now that they can make these titles mean something and hold prestige. I go back and forth on it, because sometimes I like to have additional titles, and other times I'm like, no, there's too many and whatever. So it is a very interesting conversation when you're talking about belts. But I feel like for their size right now and what they have in their roster, 4 is the perfect spot for them. I think that they can really start to create some intricate storylines, and they can bolster the titles in the way that they want to. I see the TNT Championship not only as a TV title, but like your Intercontinental Championship in a way. And I think that's what they're hoping to make it as Cody is starting this, I'm defending this week in, week out. It's the workhorse belt, which is your IC title all day.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the women's division, do you think that they're good where they are with the talent that they have? Would you add someone? And if so, who would that be?
Oh God. Yeah. If I could add people, I would, but everyone who is, I feel, would add a lot of value is contracted somewhere else right now. So until people become available, it's kind of hard to say who, but I like who they have. I like what they're doing. I like that they're bolstering. It's a shame it brought Britt Baker, getting injured and stuff. And actually, I think that her turning heel was one of the best things that they've done, and making Sheeta their champion also an excellent choice. But the addition of Chris Statlander and Big Swole, I think, are going to be massive players, and part of your cornerstone of the women's division. I think they need a little bit more power. Like Chris is very strong, so is Big Swole and Nyla, of course, but they need somebody who could come in and like show out, like a Jordan Grace. I would love to see her in AEW, and I know she's in Impact right now, and that's great, and I'm sure that she'll be there for a long time. But if I could make it happen, that's who I would pick. But like I said, it's so hard. NXT has like the strongest with Impact women's divisions, so it's hard because they're already all there. But there's a lot of green newbies that are coming up that, with a couple more years experience on the indie scene, I think could make big splashes. So we'll kind of see what happens. Yeah.
What do you think about Danny Jordan?
I like her. She talks a lot of trash. I like that.
She does. We've said that. I think she's I compared her to a female Jericho.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I really thought that when I saw her. I'm like, I really, really think she's got something there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where. I know she was on with the NWA's. What the heck is that? Circle Square.
Circle Square.
Yeah. So I don't know whether or not she's going to end up there or kind of going back and forth. But yeah, I think she's got something. The other one I really want to see come up, and this is the horror fan in me, is Abaddon.
Nice.
I absolutely love her gimmick, and I love her entrance. Is probably one of the creepiest entrances I think I've ever seen.
It's super creepy. Yeah,
I love it. Absolutely love it.
All right, that's a great choice. You know who else is on the division that I forgot to mention because she hasn't been on in a long time is Sadie Gibbs. That girl. Yep. Oh gosh, I can't wait to see her on TV week in and week out because that girl is money.
Yes,
I agree. Well, while we're on that subject, so, I mean, obviously you talked about NXT. We talked about AEW a little bit. What do you think of women's wrestling and where it's come, let's say, over the past, 3 or 4 years? And where do you see it going?
Another great question. It's come leaps and bounds. I have to say that as a woman myself, watching women's wrestling growing up was sad. It was sad for me. And I didn't like to watch a lot of it because I didn't want to watch bra and panty matches. That didn't appeal to me whatsoever. And I wanted to see women like Chyna and women like, Sable and my girl Victoria kick some butts. And Jazz. Those were my people that I loved. And I love Lita. I just never felt like they got the time and the effort that they really deserved. They put in work, man, serious work. And over the past couple of years, it's made a lot of progression, starting the women's evolution in WWE, I thought was a great first step. The fact that women main evented WrestleMania last year was massively huge for the first time ever. And I think there's been a lot of strides forward in women's wrestling, and I feel like the indie scene has been doing it longer. And now we're getting more spotlight on women, and I'm happy for that. I am happy for that. There's a long way to go in terms of inclusion and equality, but that's the rest of the world, isn't it? Right. And with women's wrestling, I love NXT's roster. I love Stardom's roster over in Japan. And Impact's, of course, the knockouts are excellent. I mean, it's so stacked. It's so good. And AEW's got places to go, but I'm happy. It's forward movement, and that can't ever be a bad thing. We need to move forward, not backwards.
That's very true. We had the pleasure of talking to some great people. So, I mean, we talked to Holodead, who's on the indie scene. We talked to Thunder Rosa, who's the champion of NWA. Oh, she was awesome. Cool. Love that. And I agree with you. I think it's really looking up. And like you had mentioned, Lita, and I love Victoria, by the way, big fan. And it's just you kind of think to yourself, they paved the way, but it's almost a shame that they weren't around now, because to see what they could have done had they been given a bigger chance than they may have gotten back then. You kind of a little bit hopeful that would have been the case. But hey, look, they did pave the way for everyone, and I mean now you've got obviously big hole created in WWE with Becky Lynch now stepping away. So we're going to kind of see what happens there because she was so dominant for so long. But yeah, it's exciting. And I think that, like you said, all the people that are coming up from the indies and everything, and it's exciting to see, for AEW, who they're going to get up there. So let me go back to a pain point here, and let's get this Mike Tyson thing out in the forefront.
Oh, no. Okay.
Listen, Jeff and I it's funny you mentioned it because, of course, it was in the news. We talked about this on our podcast, and it was like, there was such a, it got so many views, 1.2 or 1.3 million views on their YouTube channel. So, I mean, obviously it was there, but I know you mentioned it, and I think we kind of both agreed a little bit. Like, I guess my question is, where do you see this going now? Because, I mean, there's no way. I don't think they're going to have Mike Tyson wrestle Jericho. So it's got to be some sort of gimmick match, I'd imagine. And, I mean, I don't know. Where do you see this thing going?
I could see something silly going on, like the bubbly bunch kind of vibe between Jericho and Tyson, or like one of Tyson's little group that he had come out with him is fighting someone in the inner circle possibly, and Mike Tyson will be in their corner and Jericho will be in the inner circle's corner, and then they'll like fake brawl on the outside. I don't know, I could see something like that too. But I mean, Fyter Fest is coming up in June, and kind of seems like what they're doing. I don't know. It's possible. I just find it really silly. I don't know.
I mean, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I could have seen it a little more because Mike hasn't really been in the limelight all that much recently. So, I mean, you'll see him on reality TV every now and then and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think it might have had a bigger, much bigger thing to go. But I can see your point because, do they really need it? And that's what I found myself asking that question too. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I just don't know if that's necessary.
Right.
So I had the questions. I wondered this too. And I know Jeff and I had talked about this in the past as well, with Jericho being such a personality for them. And obviously he held the belt for as long as he did when it started. Obviously he, lost the belt to Moxley, but now he's involved in that big feud with Matt Hardy. So do you think they can withstand if he should happen to decide, hey, I want to go out and I want to play music because this is what he does. I mean, he's done this in WWE. He's left for a while and then come back. I mean, do you think they're okay, built up enough without having a big personality like Jericho in there for a while?
I think they could. I don't think he's going anywhere for a little while. If I will be real about it, not only just because of the world, but I think in general, I think that he might go away for a little bit to play some concerts, but I don't think he'll be gone from the screen per se. Doing the videos and drop-ins and things like that. I mean, this is the man who played a concert with Fozzy, got on a jet, went to Japan to show up in New Japan. I don't feel like it's that bad for him to do in terms of like he would make it happen is what I mean. But I think that he's with them. I mean, he's got the 3 years, and I think he's going to put in a lot of work during that time. And there will be times where we won't see him, but I think his presence will still be known somehow.
Yeah.
They could do it. I mean, they got Cody, who's massive, and of course Moxley. So there's a lot of draw, but Jericho adds so much. Like just having him on commentary during this pandemic, where the no fans era was magical. He did great things. So I mean, he adds so much value in terms of the product that, you know, they would hurt without him, sure, but could they do it? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, we talked a little bit about Kenny. So, I mean, Kenny obviously kind of, it almost seemed like I talked to some other people who had followed his career like you, and, you know, they were telling me they almost kind of think he's purposely kind of stayed back from the limelight. And, I mean, when do you think is Kenny's time? When do you think you're going to see that push from him to try to get that title away from, you know, whether it's Moxley or someone else at the time? But when do you think Kenny starts stepping to the forefront a little bit?
I think we'll see it soon. I don't know that it'll be in this year, given everything that's going on and the storyline that they're pushing right now, because they're going towards All Out and they're the tag team champions right now, and that'll take us into end of August, September. So after that, it's Revolution in November, and then nothing until Revolution in February. So I would say more 2021 for him. Kenny is so much better in the chase, and seeing him chase for that belt will be an extraordinary program. And I actually hope it takes more than 3 months to get there. I actually hope it takes like 6 months or more for him to attain the title. I don't know who he's going to take it off of yet, but I think it will happen. And I think the storyline is going to blow some people away when it does. Because if you've ever seen him fight the series with Okada, you know the potential that he has to create amazing stories in the ring. Like he sells and shows you every single thing in the ring like Okada does. And it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm excited to see it in AEW. It's going to be fun in front of American audience.
Absolutely. What do you think about I know WWE just went to this past week, so they finally started having some of their wrestlers in the crowd, people from NXT, you know, out there. What do you think about the job that both companies have done with that? I know we've kind of debated that a little bit. Should there be fans there? You know, should they have wrestlers there? Should they just have empty? You know, what's your take on the wrestlers in the audience?
I think AEW knocked it out of the park from the beginning. I think having MJF on the sidelines, heckling people, like I still to this day remember, like it was one of the very first episodes of the no fan era where they had them at ringside and he was screaming, "Let's go masked guys." I will never forget that because of how freaking hilarious he was. I still remember it. It was months ago. I think that the way that they did it was really well done. They provided enough noise where it felt like people were there. And their camera shots were so tight that you just saw them. And yes, everywhere else was empty, but you felt like you had people. Noise is good. You know, you don't realize how much fans add to a show until you don't have any. And that's not to say the wrestling is bad without fans. And we've seen many, many times, even WWE, they put on amazing matches when nobody's in the audience. So it's not really quite that. I just think it adds another level. I will say last week's Raw, the first time that they put the NXT and PC individuals there, I thought it added a lot to the show. I was waiting for someone to go into the hockey screens there, the plexiglass. I was waiting for it, but it didn't happen. But I was waiting for it.
Crash the glass.
Yeah, I think it's good. You know, silence sometimes is really hard, and having a little bit of noise and hearing people cheer and boo just adds a little bit to the atmosphere. You know, I'm very big into how does it feel when I'm watching it, and sometimes the quiet is like, it's just too quiet.
Yes.
So I think them adding it was a good move on their parts. And I liked that over NXT and SmackDown, everybody like attended, you know, it wasn't just like, it was just the NXT people, you know what I mean? That I liked.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing I would say about WWE is let the poor people sit.
Oh, I know. I thought that was so bizarre. And they did hours and hours of taping, and I'm like, dude, what? Sit
10
down.
hours of taping or so, and they're standing
Yes.
the whole time. I mean, come on, let them sit for a while.
I know. I mean, I know people stand on their feet for a very, very long time in their jobs, but at the same time, you're like, you're watching a performance. Like you should be able to sit down. I felt bad for him.
Oh man, absolutely. How about Hangman Page?
Oh,
I know
man.
when I watch that character, I'm thinking, you just always kind of think, is this going to be the week that he turns on someone? Because, that's kind of the way that they play that. I mean, is this just the way that character's going to be, or do you see eventually he's gonna finally turn on somebody there?
I've thought a lot about this, and I actually don't think Hangman's going to be the one to turn.
Okay.
I think they're going to tease it like they had at Revolution with Kenny, right? Where he looked at him and he was going to like buckshot Larry the crap out of this guy, right?
Yep.
And then he's like, no, I'm just going to sit on the ropes and I'm going to let you out, right? And then he's been, debating and I'm unsure of where my place is here and I don't really want to be around you guys. Even after that match, right? And then at this Double or Nothing, he seemed to show some solidarity until the match actually happened in Stadium Stampede, and he was like, I'm going to get a drink. And he did. But he still took care of business when Hager showed up, right? But, he showed the most solidarity with the Elite that he ever has since this whole storyline started. So I thought that was really interesting. I actually think the Bucks are going to turn on them. I think the Bucks are going to go heel.
Okay.
Heel Bucks are the best Bucks, in my opinion. They are great crap talkers. They're really good at it. And they're fun to watch when they're evil. So I have a feeling that's where that's going. Like everyone's going to think it's Hangman, but it's not.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But maybe I secretly want it to. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Hey, I've got to love the theorizing, man. I with any of these characters, it's great to think about, what they could do. And speaking of theorizing stuff, my next name, Matt Hardy. I mean, we talked about the Dark Order earlier, and I know, he kind of played that up in his Free to Delete series. He mentioned some little snippets here and there that you kind of thought, oh, this is going to be Matt Hardy. I know the Dark Order video, you heard him say some things that Matt Hardy would say when they were still in the shadows in those vignettes. What do you think that Matt Hardy brings to the table? And obviously, I mean, we've seen some of the craziness already. So what do you think Matt Hardy brings to AEW?
Oh, Matt Hardy brings an enormous amount of creativity. If you've seen him in Impact, when the Broken character came to be, he pioneered this, on a large scale, this cinematic wrestling stuff. Back in 2016, he's the guy that made it more mainstream, I will say. And that whole storyline and Brother Nero and the Hardy Compound and the Lake of Reincarnation and all this stuff really was born there and was tried to bring to the WWE, but it just obviously didn't happen for various different reasons. But now I think we're going to see the most creative Matt Hardy we've ever seen. And he's added a new layer. He's Damascus now, and he's showing the different versions of himself. And I think we're going to get so much of what we had hoped to see, as that storyline kept going in Impact. And then obviously that whole thing happened with the Hardys in Impact, and then they went to WWE and they never really took off. So I'm excited to see what he brings, and the level of experience and the knowledge that he can bring to that locker room is paramount.
Yeah, I would agree. And like you had mentioned, the stuff that he did in 2016, you're kind of seeing some of it being used now with the Fiend character a little bit over in WWE. Bray and him, I know, were friends, and then when they finished up that tag team thing, and then now you're seeing that storyline brought over, and he's being kind of creative to the same level that Matt was. So I wonder if he got a little bit of that from him. But yeah, I would agree with you. And there's already rumors that his brother may end up joining him at some point. So I mean, you never know. You might get a Hardy Boys reunion in AEW at some point in time as well. Oh my
goodness. That would be wild.
I know you were talking about that too. Well, listen, because again, you mentioned this earlier in the show that you were a Hardy's fan. Off the AEW topic a little bit, but what did you happen to see the storyline with Jeff last Friday on SmackDown? And what did you think of that if you did? Because I know, again, a lot of controversy created out there in the wrestling world. I know guys like Ryan Satin wrote about how he thought it was just a horrible thing to do. Matt, obviously, and his wife tweeted during it and said, what is going, I know I didn't feel it was, I kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable watching it. What did you think of that?
I think in our time period right now, it's incredibly tone deaf and just not a nice thing to see. Now, this is not the first time a story like this has happened, correct? We've seen it in the past with WWE and other promotions as well. I just feel like this is not something we need to do. There are ways that you can talk about like a road to redemption story, and you can create that without showing something like this. Like, you have little kids watching as well. It's not just us who understand that it's more, of a television program and it's whatever. And we see these type of storylines, not just in wrestling, but on television and movies, of course. But I just feel like if you're watching Friday Night Smackdown and, you have a young kid watching and you see that Jeff Hardy, who potentially is one of your favorite wrestlers, right, is just run down someone they want you to think, right, and is drinking. Like, why do we need that? Can't you have a redemption story of him overcoming those issues, and let's celebrate his sobriety? And, you could talk about his struggles and stuff, and that's important, but I don't think you need to show this. I thought it was just really in poor taste, and it's just, I just felt gross about it.
Yeah, that exactly. Jeff, I know you shared that opinion also.
Yeah, I just don't think it honestly hits too close to home. And for someone that has had the documented struggles that Jeff Hardy has had, it's just really tone deaf. And, you think about it, I know we talked about this on our podcast, but if you think about it, with everything right now that's going on in the world, the first image that you see on Friday night is a car accident and then a man being let off in handcuffs. Mm-hmm. It's just, it shows that, it's just a tone deaf thing. And, you're doing this to try and attract ratings. Well, this is not how you do that. I'd much rather, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this, but I'm pretty sure, for me personally, I'd much rather see him getting back to the top, like you said, from a redemption standpoint, and instead of someone framing him, because apparently that's, how it looks that this is going to play out, but someone framing him using a real life struggle for a storyline. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's lazy on the part of creative for WWE. Even if Jeff went in and pitched this idea to them, someone should have been the rational person in the room and said, no, we need to do it this way because this looks a little bit better. And given our current climate, we don't need to put this kind of stuff out there. So I just thought it was incredibly trashy.
I was going to ask you that too. Would you have felt better? Would it have come off being better to you had you known beforehand that that he was the one who came up with this? And if he went to them, like Jeff said, and said, this is, this is kind of what I want to do. Let's do this. Does that, because there were some people out there that were saying, well, as long as Jeff went in and he said, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to play this up. I want this to be out there. Does that make you feel any better about it?
It doesn't. I will say, right, none of us have the right to tell anybody what to do with their, creative, whatever that might be, whatever role he has in his creative. We can't tell him what to do. But what I can say is that I think that it's just not something that's necessary. And there are ways to tell that story, which is his story. And there are ways to tell it that has more power and effectiveness to a broader audience. And I still think it's in poor taste regardless.
Gotcha. Well, where do you see the future of AEW? So we've asked a couple people this. Where do you see this company going? And like, let's say 5 years from now. I mean, obviously they've got the long TNT deal now, and do you see them possibly trying to, hey, they're consistently beating NXT. Do you see them possibly saying, hey, we can go up against the big shows? Let's put us up against Raw, put us up against SmackDown. Let's move it to a different night. And where do you see the success of the company going?
I think the smartest thing they can do for the next, especially 5 years, is stay exactly where they are. I think they have a hold on Wednesday nights. It's an excellent way to break up your wrestling week, should you be watching things on Monday and Friday, and Wednesday as well, of course. But I think it's a smart plan what they have. They've built a really great community around Wednesday nights and watching. I think it's smart that they've added dark on Tuesday nights, which is a relatively open day. Their NWA, of course, have their program. But I think that, putting that as a way to hype their show for Wednesday is incredibly smart. And as far as where they're going, I think eventually, we'll see maybe some sort of streaming service from them. I don't think that's any time in the near future, but I think down the road, once they have more content to offer, I think that would be really smart of them to do. Instead of like having, international on Fight, but everything else on Bleacher Report, which I know TNT owns or is a part of. But I feel like that could be something that they could work towards. I know there's talk about HBO Max or Plus or whatever the heck it's called. I don't even know, but there's something like that going on with potentially AEW Dark. And, they're definitely making big forward movements, but I think the best thing that they can do is really build the foundation of what AEW is going to be, build their stars, build their new people. And as they continue to grow onwards and upwards, they continue to do what they've done since the onset, which is involve their fan base. They're incredibly responsive to what their fans have to say. If you just briefly talk about the Nightmare Collective, that was something that was broadly disliked by many people, including myself. And they really listened to the fans and took that away. And Cody's decision to not be in the title picture should he lose, he said that the fans didn't want to see an EVP with the major championship, so he took himself out of it. Now, I think he'll eventually go back in it, but I think that was a nice move. And Brandy has started AEW Heels, which is the first time something like this has ever happened. An all-female wrestling fan group in coalition with the female roster of AEW. I was lucky enough to be involved in that on the first Zoom call to get information on it. And it's incredibly powerful what they're trying to do. So I think if they continue to foster that relationship with their fan base and really kind of partner with things like StarCast, and I think they're doing stuff with Ring of Honor, maybe. I don't know. Marty's back. I don't know what that means. We'll see. If they continue to foster these partnerships, I think it's onwards and upwards for AEW. And I hope in 5 years that I can look back on this episode and be like, yeah, good. I'm glad.
Oh man, it's exciting. It really is. And I mentioned this before when we were talking to Fowl. I said this, and it's exciting to see something being built from the ground up. And right now we have two. I mean, NWA obviously has been there years and years and years ago, but they're kind of just building up too. And then seeing these two companies just building from the ground up and being able to get on board with it right at the start is exciting, because I mean you can't say that. I mean, I've been watching wrestling since I was probably 7 or 8, late 70s, early 80s, but they were around for a long time. So like you had mentioned early in the show with your grandfather watched it, and the same for me, my father, my grandfather. So it's exciting to see something building from the ground up.
It is exciting, and it's fun. It's new and it's exciting, and regardless of how you feel about AEW, I think that they've made waves in the wrestling community, and I'm hoping that, as I said at the very beginning of when AEW started, that this is a good thing for everybody. That it encourages people to step up their game and produce content that we like, and the fans win here, and no matter what you like, you could watch whatever you want. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. Yeah. But I really honestly do believe that they've made enough of a voice out there, enough of a wave to start kicking some people in the rear, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. And that's why I think, we talked about the WCW days, and I think that, being that was a big heyday for wrestling, I think that was why. I mean, you had the competition between the two going at it. And, look, competition just builds, better product. It makes both of them better. And yeah, I really would agree with you. Definitely. Jeff, do you have anything else for the Queen before we let her go? I don't want to take up too much of her time here.
Just one last question I have in terms of women being involved in wrestling, not just from the wrestler standpoint, but just fandom, and what you would say to younger girls who are possibly interested in watching it. How do you feel like that's changed over the years, and what would you say to encourage them to get involved?
Being a female in wrestling podcasting has really opened my eyes to the lack of female presence, not only in the podcasting world, but in wrestling in general, and having women in high-powered positions in wrestling to have better representation, whether it's, executives on in companies, or running their promotions, or correspondence, or commentary, or whatever it might be. But especially in our little wrestling community on Twitter and in the wrestling media, there's been such a lack of women. And I've felt like over my past year and change of podcasting now, I have seen so many more women feel comfortable coming out and expressing their opinions about wrestling. And to anybody who's thinking about getting involved in the wrestling community, there is a warm, welcoming place for you. Not only with me, hello, come talk to me on my show anytime y'all want, but within this community as well. I found, there is a lot of like, you're a woman, you don't really like wrestling, or you're a woman and you must like it because your man likes it, or whatever. That has fallen a little bit by the wayside, I will say. And as we continue to promote female content creators and female podcasters and females in the media, I feel that the male-dominated industry of wrestling is going to get a little bit more inclusive towards women. And that's something that I personally really feel strongly about. And I like to promote female creators, including myself, and try to get involved in as many different wrestling content as I can, because I feel like, there's a lot of women who love wrestling, but they have been afraid to kind of come out and talk. So to them, I would say, don't worry, there's a community here. Not everybody is bad. You can have a voice, and I encourage you to start whatever it is, whether that's a blog about wrestling, or contributing to wrestling news sites, or starting a podcast, or joining a Discord, or coming to shows. There's a lot of opportunities for women, and it's gotten so much better, I would say, within the last 2 years. It's been really lovely to see.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, before we let you go, can you please tell all our listeners out there where they can find you, obviously where they can find your podcast and stuff as well, and any other place on social media that they can reach out to you if they would like to?
Well, certainly. Well, firstly, I'd like to say thank you so very much for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking to you both. It's been super fun, and shout out to Fowl.
I certainly will. Thank you.
Yes, I will let him know as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
But y'all were great. And if you'd like to follow me, please do. I'm at the Queen of Any on Twitter, and at X the Queen of Any on Instagram. My show Queen's Court drops every single Wednesday as one half of the hashtag Queen and Pup Connection on Smart to Death Radio. And you can find me wherever podcasts are dropped. I am there. Just search Queen's Court. I also do a show called The Queen and Pops Experience on DYWTSB Network. So you can follow them at DYWTSB. And honestly, that's where I am. Come interact with me. I'm really nice most of the time. We can't be nice all the time, right? I won't lie and say I'm nice all the time, but I will say that the majority of my social media presence is all about promoting positivity and inclusion. So if that sounds like something you want to be involved with, you can come find me there. And as I always say, please, y'all, let's continue to be kind to one another, because that's what we need in the world.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. And listen, thank you so much for coming on, because we had a ball too. We great pleasure talking to you and getting your perspective. And I hope our listeners will go out there and check out your podcast as well. I know Jeff and I will also.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome.
Oh, please do. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. No problem. Thank you for joining us. And yes, stay safe. And like she said, everybody, just be nice to one another, and we will talk to you all soon.